Hello. Today we will be discussing the Balkan Wars of 1913. These wars saw the Ottoman Empire get almost entirely forced out of Europe and were a significant contributing factor towards the outbreak of the First World War, as they saw the further development of relations and tensions within the Balkan region. But first, some background. So, the Ottomans had controlled most of the Balkan Peninsula, that's this area here, for centuries. Whilst this had been going on for centuries, it wasn't particularly popular with the people that were actually living in the Balkans, and eventually, as the Ottoman Empire began to weaken over time, this would eventually see the various nationalities of the Balkans begin to break away. As we can see on this map here, the Ottomans began to just gradually lose territory: Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt. And well, with this weakening, they also were coming into more conflict with the other European powers, who, of course, weren't all that fond of the Ottomans, really, and so the Ottomans were now being engaged in further competition with the European powers. Which wouldn't usually turn out too well for the Ottomans, and which would, of course, further weaken them, and therefore allowing these nationalities is to have even more chances as to rise up and to break away. And the first one of these was Greece in 1829, and of course the borders would sort of change over time. Greece was initially just sort of the tip there. They grew with further concessions from the Ottomans and such. Then you had the other nationalities, like the Serbs. You had the Romanians, which were originally the Wallachians and Moldovans united. Bulgaria. Funny story about Bulgaria. Russia went to war with the Ottomans back in the 1870s and won pretty bloody decisively. And in the resulting Treaty of San Stefano, Bulgaria was granted immense gains, including, crucially, a sizable part of the Macedonia region. The other great powers pushed back on it, as they saw it as just an attempt by Russia to try and gain more power and influence, and thereby threatening the position of the other European powers, particularly Britain, as Britain wanted to keep Russia contained to the Black Sea, and, well, if Bulgaria got both a Russian prince on its throne and a coastline on the Aegean Sea, which were both promised by the Treaty of San Stefano, it would potentially threaten British dominance in the region. So Russia was forced to basically pull back Bulgaria's gains into just being only the northern half of modern day Bulgaria. It wasn't that much, and it would remain as a semi-vassal state of the Ottomans. This, however, would still embolden nationalism, and these independence movements would continue to go on, and the Ottomans continue to face more and more losses. In 1908, you had the Bosnian crisis, where the Austro-Hungarian Empire seized the at the time still Ottoman-controlled territory of Bosnia. Yeah, this comes back into play later. And of course, Italy going to war with the Ottomans in 1912 and taking Libya. And these events, combined with just the general weakening of the Ottomans over time, proved rather interesting to the nations in the Balkans, particularly Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece. Especially once Bulgaria had declared its full independence in 1908. And, well, after this, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Montenegro would secretly unite into the Balkan League alliance, which would lead to war. More specifically, the First Balkan War, as it saw the three nations of the Balkan League up here, as well as Greece, launch a coordinated attack on the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottomans, being as weak as they were and with an army as outdated and undersupplied as they had, it meant that they pretty quickly found themselves losing. And the other great powers actually had to step in order to ensure that Bulgaria wouldn't just march on Constantinople. So, to end the war, these were the divisions, and Albania sort of broke free from the Ottomans at about the same time. And well, the thing is see, that's the Macedonia region down there, the bit that Bulgaria had been given and then taken away from the Treaty of San Stefano. They wanted that back, but it was also claimed by Serbia. And so the agreement they came to was that the Macedonian region would sort of be split between the two so long as Serbia got to annex Albania. However, the Austro-Hungarians didn't want the Serbians to have Albania, mainly because, well, if they had it, then they'd have their own sea axis. They'd be even freer from Austrian control. And so, therefore, they stepped in to prevent this annexation. And since Serbia didn't get Albania, they therefore didn't want to hand over Macedonia. And so Bulgaria, who wanted Macedonia, as well as some territories from Greece, namely Thessaloniki there, well, they wanted these, and they were prepared to fight the countries which only a few months ago had been their allies in order to gain them. The result was the Second Balkan War, and as you can probably notice by the difference in the borders, didn't work out too well for Bulgaria. Because they initially attacked Serbia and Greece at the same time, in order to gain the Macedonian region. And, well, it didn't exactly end too well for them. The Bulgarian army was bigger than Serbia's, it was bigger than Greece's. With the two combined, it's roughly equal. But then Romania and the Ottoman Empire joined as well, since Bulgaria was preoccupied with Serbia and Greece. Yes, and they were worried that since the Bulgarians had further claims on their territory, they'd be next. So they also then came in, and Bulgaria lost that one pretty badly. So they're pushed out of East Thrace there, they lost territory to Greece, they lost some minor concessions to Serbia, southern Dobruja to Romania, and this is actually referred to as the first national catastrophe in Bulgaria, with the second one being the First World War. So Bulgaria, they weren't exactly pleased with the new state of affairs, but there was nothing they could really do about it. For the time being, at least, that is. The aftermath of the Balkan Wars is wide-sweeping. Of course, this left Bulgaria rather disgruntled, as they still wanted Macedonia, and the treaties that had been originally promised to them under the Treaty of San Stefano, which would eventually push them towards joining the Central Powers in 1915. And also, once it was just yet another thing that served to just destroy the credibility of the Ottoman Empire. And this would actually lead directly into a coup in the Ottoman Empire, led by the Committee of Union and Progress, or as they're better known, the Young Turks, which led a coup d'etat in 1913 to overthrow the Ottoman government, installing themselves as the new ruling party, which would eventually have some rather interesting side effects in future, particularly with their policy of so-called Turkification, and which would eventually lead to the Armenian genocide. But anyway, what the Balkan Wars would also do was embolden pan-Slavism. This was the policy he supported. This was the concept heavily supported by Russia, and also heavily supported in Serbia, with Serbia, of course, quite famously supporting and later going on to carry out the idea of Yugoslavia, or the Union of the South Slavs. And well, this would greatly contribute to World War I, as well. Such pan-Slavic movements, such as those in Bosnia, would eventually lead the Gavrilo Princip of the Black Hand terrorist organisation to assassinate Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, which, as we all know, was the inciting cause for the July crisis, and as a result also the First World War. And so, therefore, ultimately, the impact of the Balkan Wars was that it's led to a change in the government of the Ottoman Empire, which would push them closer to Germany and also push them to pushing them towards policies that would see them commit atrocities. But also it would serve to further embolden pan-Slavic nationalism, which would eventually lead down the road towards the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and the First World War. So, thank you very much for watching. Like, comment and subscribe if you like the video. If you have any further questions or any topics that you'd like me to cover, please leave them down in the comments down below, and I will be seeing all of you in the next video. Goodbye.